Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we have the opportunity to service a Penn Slammer 560. It was made in the USA, so it's probably before 2005 when most of this production went overseas. We're going to take this reel apart. We're going to show you how to service it, how to keep it fishing for years to come. This one comes from Mike. You've seen Mike send several reels in before. One of the things that's nice about Mike's reels is they're always cleaned and well maintained, and well, it's just in for its basic service. We're going to start by removing the spool. The Slammer has the Slammer drag stack that's underneath. It keeps it together and keeps it somewhat waterproof. It also has a little bit of a drag stack up top. We'll service that at the end of this when it comes time for us to complete the exterior pieces. So we're going to remove the gear side. I'm going to take all these external pieces off. I'm going to show you what's underneath this reel. And we'll tell you as we do that I would like to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to the channel, if you like the art of reel repair, if you like to see how reels are manufactured, how they come together, how they come apart, how you service them, how you keep them fishing for years of trouble-free service, well, if you subscribe, you'll learn how to do that and more as we cover all kinds of topics in addition to just taking the reel apart. So there's 4 case screws outside on this reel, and I looked as I was trying to figure out how the reel comes apart, and there's a noticeable separation of the side case there, which means that the side case comes off before you remove that axle shaft and service the top of the reel. As I'm doing this, I'm taking the pieces and parts and I'm putting them into my parts tray. I'll show you that in a moment. And one of the things I like to do with the side plate screws is to make sure that they're all the same size. So far they're all the same size, so there's no worries when you go to put the reel back together again. I like that parts tray idea. Other people have different ways of doing it. Whatever works for you. I would just encourage you to make an orderly routine of it and make sure that you know where the pieces and parts are when it's time to reinstall. Alright, well, this is an interesting one. Here's your Slammer. It has the side case. It has that little shim that goes on your main gear. And why I said it's interesting, these got studs on that main gear. I believe that's going to be the same main gear for the Slammer that has the bait feeder feature. Well, we can just remove the main gear straight up. I don't want to lose that little washer. That goes between the end of the main gear and the bearing. The bearing's in the side case. I'm going to oil that bearing, just let it soak right through as we do our service. Just leave that off to the side. There's one screw here that's holding the shaft onto the crosswind block, so we'll remove that now. And I encourage you, if you don't know how to service the reel, to take pictures along the way. That's what I'm doing here. I'm using a video to take the pictures. You don't need to do the video. Any still camera, cell phone, digital camera, hey, even use a old-fashioned film if you want, but make sure that you take the pictures as reference points so that when you go to reinstall, well, you won't be lost. The axle shaft comes out. We have a crosswind block. Now that crosswind block has a certain orientation to it. You'll notice that it's not a square block. There's a wing on one side and a lower point on the other side, and this is top. Now on this one it might be a little bit hard to confuse that. On others it's not that hard to do at all, and I've seen reels come in my shop after somebody tried servicing them telling me that there was an issue with the reel, and it was because they put the crosswind block in upside down. Alright, one more piece down there. I'm going to just remove the oscillation or crosswind gear. And you do that because, well, as you can see, there's some greases and oils underneath. We want to make sure that we get all of those out of the way. I just generally use paper towels and cotton swabs and pieces like that to mop up. If it's severely corroded or old grease, it's chunked on or things like that, well, then I'm going to go to a more abrasive pad like a kitchen scrubby, or I'll go to a steel wool even if necessary. But on a reel like this, I wouldn't expect anything less of Mike. It was a nice clean reel and there's not a lot going on there. I'm going to do the same thing with the bearing in the back here. I'm going to oil that and let it seep in. And we're going to come up top and we're going to remove the rotor. The rotor is held in by a single set screw and a rotor nut. Just like everything else, when that set screw comes off, it goes into my parts tray so I don't lose it. Then we have that little tie-down collar, and that probably is a 12mm nut, or 13mm nut, depending on what, 13mm. Whatever I think it is, it isn't. Alright, so I'm going to use a offset wrench to break that, and as soon as I can turn it off by hand, well, that's what I'm going to do. Into my parts tray, the rotor comes off nice and easy. And again, another nice attempt here to keep this assembly as waterproof as possible. So we have three screws holding that cap on. That's a bearing retention cap and cover. It's going to keep this dry, or as dry as it can. So there's a lot of thought that went into this. That's one of the reasons why the Slammers have the reputation of being a good reel in the surf, because the drag is under the spool, and they've done a good job early on of keeping the open spots that would normally leak in the oils covered, or the salts rather. Just like I did with the other one, the bearing came out of the side cover. The other one, I put all three down to make sure that those screws are the same. Over another corner of my parts tray, and then we should be able to remove this, and then we should be able to remove the whole stack. Again, we're doing that so that we can clean both above and underneath. Every now and then you get some greases and oils underneath that do that. Since I've turned this over, we've oiled that bearing, I might as well just put that right back in. Notice your sandwich here. You got a bearing, and an anti-reverse clutch. I'm going to take the top bearing off. I'm going to take the anti-reverse assembly off. Notice on the anti-reverse assembly you've got silver up top and you have a Teflon bottom. So when you go to reinstall, very important that that clutch goes on the right way. If it doesn't, your reel's going to turn in reverse mode and it's going to be stuck going forward because, well, going forward becomes the reverse if it's upside down. That's lessons learned. There's a reason I can tell you that. I've done it. All right. We're going to clean that shaft off. It's nice and clean. We're going to go ahead now and we're going to re-lube. I get my brush. I use an Otis brush. I use fishing reel grease. I recommend that you only use fishing reel grease. In this case, this is Penn Precision reel grease. I'll put a good dose of grease onto the gear section below. So much of your reel repair is nothing more than taking the reel apart, examining the pieces and parts that are in the reel, cleaning them, relubing. I'm going to relube the bearings. I oil the bearings. I'm going to oil those and reassembling, making sure that it's got plenty of life left. Oil the bearing. Top side, there's a clutch shield inside there. Make sure that that goes on correctly. Unlike the other ones, interestingly enough, this one does not sit proud, so there's no carrier in that regard. There's your bearing sandwich again. You can put the whole piece back in. You want to hold the bottom of your pinion gear as you go and put the second part in now. You need to turn this to make sure that those ridges of the one align with the other. Line up the sides, get those three screws out of here, out of your parts tray, that being here. And go ahead and put them back together again. Now in this case, it doesn't matter which way you start because it's a triangle. There's no benefit one way or another of putting it in one side versus the other. If it was 4 screws, I would tell you to go kind of north, south, east, west, kind of rotate that so that it doesn't become problematic. But in this case, well, it's just not there. All right, that goes in on this side, and one more. So a rather uncomplicated reel. There's not much going on inside. That's always a good thing in my mind. If you have simplicity of design, or said another way, a clean design, well, to me that's an advantage because there's fewer moving parts and less things to break. I'm just going to make sure that the pinion gear turns and that it stops when you back it off. On the bail feature, you have a rod. You really don't need to oil that, but you can. I oil the seams of the bail arms. I do not remove the bail arm unless it's broken. And oil the roller. Then you want to press on your bearing or on your pinion gear, and then find the square side shoulders so that you can put the rotor back on. This has got a straightforward clockwise tightening. Go ahead and grab our wrench to tighten it down the rest of the way. Give it a spin, make sure it spins nice and freely, and boy, does it ever. With 2 ball bearings on there, it better spin freely. Find your cap. And then you might have to do a minor adjustment just to make sure that the hole in the cap lines up with the hole in the rotor so that you can put that tie down screw in. Easy enough to know what a tie down screw is. That's what we're doing here. We're going to our case, our little fast food container, and we're just going to get the pieces that, well, came out. All right, that's done on that side. It's burned just it's loose as a goose, huh? It just keeps wanting to fall out here. All right, bearings in. Let's go ahead and clean this main gear. There's not much going on with the main gear. I don't know, it probably was lightly oiled, or most of the oil and greases have worn off of this. This one's very dry. So let's go ahead and grab the brush and make sure that you remedy that situation by getting a nice amount of grease. You don't have to over grease it. The over grease is only going to spin off with centrifugal force. It'll all wind up inside the cup. Make sure you get enough spread about it. And we can just go ahead and put that right back. Whoops, I'm not going to put that back in quite yet. So inspect the teeth on the crosswind or the oscillation gear. Make sure that they're all in place, not missing any. This one had no indication of being a rough rider at all, so I'm not concerned terribly with the teeth, but give it a cursory check at any rate. And on this one, you get grease on all 3 sides. Get a little bit on that stud too, because this one is the main player. It touches everything. When you go to put your oscillation gear in, make sure that the stud is down low so that you can clear the path with that. I think when we took this out, we found that you can put that main gear in behind it, so we're just going to put a very light coating of grease onto the axle shaft. I say light because if you put a heavy coat on, it's only going to get pushed right off as you go through the pinion gear. On your crosswind block, make sure you get grease behind and get it in that slot where that stud is going to ride. Then invert it. Make sure you get it seated over that stud. And then we can put the axle shaft in. Just get some of that grease off my hands. All right, here's your axle shaft. That goes in next. You're going to need to line your axle shaft and the hole in that crosswind block so that they can accept the screw that you're going to use to tie this down. This is a rather unique cross line block as far as pen goes. The majority of the pen reels do not use this setup. Well, while I'm doing this, if you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, and maybe you want to know more about this, maybe you're interested in the designs or what reels kind of work like this or who their competitors are, those kinds of things, leave that in the comment section. I will try to answer those questions for you. All right, the main gear goes back in now. Make sure it's seated. And before we put the cover on, we can actually turn this. Make sure that it's running and it's running nice and smooth. Remember that little thin washer that we had? That goes between the side plate case. Take the side plate case and the bearing. Make sure that that seats nicely. Now I did notice that there is a little bit of salt accumulation on these screws here. Mike does saltwater fishing. So I'm just going to put a light shot of penetrating oil that will dissolve the salts, and we'll be able to put the screws back in with a little bit of protection too. Well, these go in each pace and each slot in the case, and again they're all the same screw, so it doesn't matter which way or which location those screws go in. I like the Slammers. I have a Slammer in the 4000 series. Very nice little reel. And again, what you saw in here that's kind of interesting was that you have an extra level of protection under the rotor to keep out the salt water from intrusion into the main case. And you have a drag in the Slammer system that we'll show you in a moment that has an underneath drag, so that the top side drag washers typically will allow salt water to come in, while this one has that little cone structure by the bearings that's going to keep most of that from getting down inside the case. All right, there we go. Just got a little grease there that we want to clean up. Let's go ahead and put the handle on while we're doing this. This handle can also use a little bit of oil onto that little shaft, the collapsible shaft. I get a question from time to time, what oils are you using? I use several. I use Real-X. Oh, that's nice and smooth. I wouldn't expect anything less. I use Real-X. This one's Lucas fishing reel oil, and I use Penn Precision reel oil. Really don't have a preference one way or another as to which ones, but I do have a preference that it is a fishing reel oil. I'm going to take the top piece off first. Use my little pointer to kind of get that spring clip out. That's a circular spring clip. You don't want that flying away, so please hold it tight. And all we have is the one washer up top here. Just make sure that it's clean. Clean the cavity. This is a Teflon washer, so you don't need to do anything with a Teflon washer. It's a petrochemical product, so it kind of is self-lubricating. Take care of that and put that under. So find the ridge, reinstall your spring. That's the top side, but that of course is not your drag. Your drag is below here. I'm going to use a micro screwdriver to do that. And I try to keep most of my tools very close at hand because I hate to put down a project and go walk off and try and find a screwdriver or a wrench or something like that. From time to time it happens. Every now and then you get a quirky kind of a reel and you're just not ready for it. But for the most part, my wrenches are both the metric wrenches and the standard SAE wrenches, which come in handy on the older reels. And 2 out of 3 I got. And that way I can just reach into the tray, find what I need, and just dump those 3 screws in here. Now that Slammer drag can come out. You can see that I've had some grease. It's always interesting when I find that grease on the bottom, because that washer can't go anywhere on the bottom. Kind of funny like that, but you have tabs here. This is a carbon text washer. You can see which one had the tabs. What I like about this is you don't have to replace your drag washer because you can simply flip it over. There will be no wear on the side where these tabs interlock because it's not dragging against anything. Best way to clean a washer like this is a hard brush. I happen to have a metal brush, but you'll see it if you just pull it. Here's an example. All of those ridges all of a sudden become very pronounced again. So what's happened in this case is he hasn't worn these washers off. The grease has just been forced into it. All right, well, that was the top side. I'm going to invert that so that we have a fresh side here when he goes fishing again. And this might not be easy for you to see. We'll try and do our best to get that over. So you can see those tags sit in the indentations of the case, and when they do that, there's no way that that drag can spin. Now we have a pressure plate is up next. You want to make sure that's nice and clean. That's going to fit right over the top. Actually, I think we just want to do it here. Probably easier. A little wing for the line catches there. Okay, just take that pressure plate, put that over the top here. That's your click button. And you got to click ridge here. And then you'll see that there's an indentation here, which is going to go over that button there. So the click can go in any direction. Straighten that up. Find your click centering. And now you're on the way you need to be on. And all you need to do now is find those little screws again. And me and little screws, well, we don't play well together. So I'm going to start with a little bit of grease. See if I can't hold that screw on. And that's that one's not cooperating. Let's try and move up the scale in terms of the slot of those. And this is always fun getting the first one. Once you get the first one, well, the rest kind of go into play. I think I got it started with that one. I'll go back to the small screwdriver. Yep, we got the first one. All right, we'll do the same thing again. Use that little bit of grease. I'm often asked why I have that glove on my hand. Well, that's it. The glove becomes part of your extended tools. Keeps the grease off your hands and enables you to work a little bit better. Number 2 is going in now. Get it started and then go over to the small one. I can't clear the ridge with the blade on the other one. And one more. Try that again. Let's set this. With any luck, I would call that a little bit less traumatic than normally with this small pieces and parts. Okay, I think we got it. Well, it's a nice reel. I think everybody would agree to that. It's a nice reel and it keeps most of the water off those drag washers, as you saw. There's no way, if that water's coming down inside the reel, that it's coming over to the to where those drag washers are housed. It's just going to fall down the axle shaft, worst case. Let's go ahead and put that back on. Grab our button. Of course, we want to tighten it down, make sure it holds. That's one of the more important things to do. As I wonder if we really need all those rotations tightened, and then back it off once it's tightened. Let's give it that final spin. So that's just a beautiful reel. I noticed that I just got a little squeak there. So what do we say? Squeaking wheel gets the oil. We just oil the handle there. There's also an insert there, which is why I like the Lucas Oil one. You can fit it into that hole there and do the oiling there. Give that a spin. Beautiful. Give it a trip on the bail. Mike, your reel is ready to go fishing again. So I hope everybody's enjoyed that. To all the first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.